need to be made and dive right into it. Todd, am I missing anything?
Good morning, Mark. Good morning, everybody. No, Mark, you are not. And in fact, where Emily Gothard can't make it. She has a sick kid, which leaves us at 10 voting members, and we have 6 present, so we have a quorum.
Awesome.
I just want to say hello to Stephanie Clark, who's here on behalf of PK Runkles and the Secretary of State today.
She's not a familiar face. Good to see you, Stephanie. Thanks for joining today.
Get rid of me.
Well, let's just give it another minute or two. Good to see some of you. Haven't seen you for a while. Tony, your hair has changed, as has Scott's.
Good to see
Tony has less and Scott seems to have more.
Well, my wife I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that she cut my hair last night. She always wants to know what it looks like, how people take it.
We'll give you the seal of approval.
Yeah, she said I had puffballs on my hair, and so that's a dreaded no-no to have a puffball hair.
Well, why don't I just do one thing real quickly? Representative Anderson has been appointed as one of the members, the House side member for the Public Records Advisory Council. As some of you may recall, Karin Power was the House member on the PRAC, and gosh, it was maybe 3 months ago, Rep. Anderson, I believe that the Speaker appointed you to this council, and we have not met since then. So I thought it appropriate, at least at this point, to introduce you to the Public Records Advisory Council and give you an opportunity to perhaps share a few words of wisdom and thought on your part, and then perhaps we'll just dive into the agenda. We do have a lot of work to do today and a lot of subject matter to cover, but would welcome any thoughts that you care to share with the council. Thank you.
Sure. I don't know if they're words of wisdom. I have very few of those. But I have met with Todd a few times to discuss this. I'm a lawyer. I'm a trial lawyer. I've been a lawyer for 47 years, most of it in litigation. I also was a Salem City Councilor here in our fair city, the capital city, for 8 years. And I'm a Democrat, and I ran and won election the last cycle, and I'll be running again. I still have an active law practice, although not quite as active as it used to be.
Yeah, I gathered the Legislative Assembly takes up a little bit of that billing hour opportunity, so I certainly understand.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us, and Emily, thank you for joining us as well. Emily, would it make sense, Todd, really just briefly for the members of the council to just introduce themselves and identify themselves so everybody knows? We haven't met in quite some time, and I think it might be appropriate to just do a quick round of introductions, if not for anybody but Rep. Anderson. So, Todd, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, of course, but perhaps calling out the actual members of the council so that they can briefly introduce themselves. Thank you.
Sure, Mark. Thanks, Rep. Anderson. Hello again. I'm Todd Albert, the Public Records Advocate. Welcome to the group. And I'll call on Steve next.
Hi, I'm Steve Sugo. I'm a council member. I'm Northwest editor for ProPublica in my day job.
Oh, sorry. Stephanie, why don't you go ahead, please?
Sure. Thanks, Todd. Hi, everyone. I'm sitting in for PK Runkles Pearson today, representing the Secretary of State. My name is Stephanie Clark, and I'm the State Archivist. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Mark, can you make your introduction, please?
Good afternoon, or I should say morning. Boy, I'm ahead of myself. Mark Landauer. I'm a lobbyist for a number of clients, but I also represent the Special Districts Association of Oregon, and that is why I'm on the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily?
Yes, thank you, Todd, and thank you everybody for being here. I'm Emily Harris. I use she, her pronouns. I am an outgoing member. I hold the seat that is for a member, a journalist who's a member of a professional association, and they'll be selecting a new appointment will be coming up. I'll be here through probably February. In my day job, I report for Axios Portland, and I think that's everything. Thanks.
Thanks, Emily. We'll be sorry to see you go. Shasta, why don't you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, my name is Shasta Kearns-Moore. I am a freelance reporter, but spend a lot of my time doing disability advocacy and care economy advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott, you're next on my screen, so go ahead, please.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Scott Stoffer. I'm a member of the PRAC. I am the city recorder for the city of Milwaukee, and I represent the voice of cities on this council.
Thanks, Scott. If we have an opportunity to vote on it, I'm voting in approval of your beard. Tony, you're next, please.
Hey, everyone. Good morning. Tony Hernandez. I represent the public. When I was first appointed into the council, I was working in working communications in the nonprofit space. But next year, I'm kind of starting my own thing, communications for private clients. So that's where I come from. Thanks.
Thanks, Tony. I don't think Michael Crone is here, so Andrea, why don't you finish us off, please?
Hello, I'm Andrea Chiapella, the Communications Director at the Department of Administrative Services. Welcome.
So that I believe covers the membership at this point who are in the meeting. And Todd, I'm quickly moving over to the agenda and just asking the members whether there are any additions or modifications to the proposed agenda for today. Not hearing anything. I suppose we can consider the agenda approved. And then Todd, if you wouldn't mind just updating me or the council, we have approval of the January, the March and the September meeting minutes from 2023. Oh, I see Senator Thatcher has joined us. So just real quickly, welcome, Senator Thatcher. We've done a quick round of introductions for newly appointed Representative Anderson. Of course, Representative Anderson knows you. We all know Senator Thatcher from her long time service, but quick introduction just to say hello.
Hello. Sorry I was late, having technical issues like from the Twilight Zone, but here I am.
Glad you could join us. Todd, I gathered that those meeting minutes were posted for the time. And yeah, Tony, I see, just as a reminder, everybody, if you could raise your virtual hand, but I saw a physical hand come up from Tony. Tony, yes, sir.
Yeah, quick question. So the September minutes, I thought it was a subcommittee meeting. Was that a full PRAC meeting from last September?
I believe it was a short meeting to plan for this meeting.
Yeah, the YouTube page said legislative subcommittee, so I didn't do the minutes for that one, and I apologize if that was actually a full council meeting. But I can work on it when I'm working on tonight's and get it for the next meeting. So I apologize about that if that's the case.
No worries, Tony. We're always grateful for your work, and your position is up for election today. So if you don't want to do these minutes anymore, perhaps someone else will step in and relieve you of the burden.
So I gather then that we are looking at the January and March minutes, correct?
Yes,
and
Mark.
I'd certainly entertain a motion.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Tony moves and Todd seconds. All in favor indicate by thumbs. Looks good. All right. We've dispensed of agenda item number, Roman number 2. And now I'm sure for the exciting conversation of an election of council leadership for the chair, vice chair, and secretary. Todd, I don't recall that we had a real in-depth discussion about how we were going to take this on. And so I would certainly open it to the floor as to how the council members would like to proceed. Or Todd, if you have any bright ideas on how you would like this to proceed, I'm certainly all ears as well.
Well, I have to say last time, so 2 years ago, I guess at this point, we elected leadership after a little arm twisting because our members wanted to really focus on the work and not be distracted by the leadership duties, I think, associated with running the council. But maybe Mark, Emily, and Tony would want to speak a little bit about the work that went into these positions. And for those who are staying on the council who are in these positions, if they're interested in staying, letting us know. And maybe if we only have one person per position, that'll be easy enough. If we have more than one person interested in a position, maybe a quick statement from each individual about why they're interested, and then we proceed to a vote on each position.
Well, I recall very distinctly that I was nominated and elected as the chair, and I was the only vote against that proposition. But listen, I'm one who believes that the opportunity to chair should be shared, and I have no compunction to continue as the chair. However, if the members of the council feel that I should continue, fine. But again, I believe that I've had a 2-year run, and there are a lot of very capable, intelligent members of the council who could do just as good, if not better, of a job than I could. So I'm how shall I say, agnostic about whether or not I should continue or not. So if there are others who would like to sit in this chair, by all means, I think that's great.
I can speak to the vice chair role. The vice chair role actually didn't take up a ton of time. It's really, there were a few, just agenda setting, coordinating meetings, some decision making, short meetings generally with Mark and Todd. So I would encourage anybody to take this position. It does not, it's not a large burden or time consuming at all. I think last time we made a point to make sure that the chair and vice chair, or maybe we didn't make this point, but it turned out that way after some discussion. I can't remember, but they were held by people representing different stakeholders in this, very well balanced committee. And so I'd encourage us to look toward that again. The more time-consuming piece was chairing the legislative committee, and that was time-consuming for all of us on board, which I just want to take this minute to reiterate my appreciation. Thanks.
Representative Anderson.
My hand was up, and it was up to say, I thought if we were doing a formal thing, I was going to nominate you and move that the nominations be closed for chair, but maybe I'm being too lawyer wonkish.
Well, Representative, I appreciate that, but I would like you to just hold that motion for at least a moment, because I hope that there's some people that are just being stubbornly shy, shall we say. Todd, and then yes, Todd, please.
I just want to hear from Tony as well, if he'd be willing to share about what goes into the secretary role, which has a singular duty, preparing our minutes after a meeting.
Yeah, thanks. So first things to know, what was explained at the time when we were having this discussion last time is the PRAC post the YouTube video of this recording right away, and that is considered by state law the I guess the first draft, let's say, of minutes. And so then my job has been, when I signed up, I remember I was using some fancy software that allowed transcription to make it easy. And I made very long transcripts of each minute. Long story short, I've transferred over to creating shorter minutes that basically hyperlink the YouTube video at the start of every member's statements. And so I'll just copy and paste the agenda and then plug in hyperlinks and give like a 1-sentence summary of what members are saying. All in all, it takes anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, depending on the length of the meeting. But you know, it's the cool thing about the you know, because there's the video portion of the video of the minutes of the meeting. My approach has just been to kind of think about, you know, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if anyone in the future wants to see what we talked about on paper form, how might that be best used? And so, yeah, anyways, hyperlinks and short summaries is what I suggest for anyone doing it. And I'd be happy, like Mark said, if no one is interested in the position, I'd be happy to continue.
I should probably, Todd, if I may, just briefly describe by the chair's role, I suppose, as well. And I say this with all respect and admiration for every member of the council. It's like herding flies sometimes. I love you all. No, in all seriousness, it's really sort of much of what Emily described is planning our meetings with the public records advocate, ensuring that everybody is getting an opportunity to be heard, obviously running these meetings, and trying to be as fair-minded and open-minded as possible. I know that we all come from different roles and backgrounds, and we're here representing certain segments of either the public or government or the media. I've just tried to be a very fair minded individual who's open to all views and suggestions while weighing the amount of time that we have to work together in improving the transparency of Oregon's public records and so forth. So I suppose that's just a quick way of describing at least the approach that I have taken in this work, and hope that I've been I hope that those of you who have been a party to this group have felt that I've been a fair arbiter. So Todd, yes, please.
Thank you, Mark. I was just going to add for the secretary position, Teams now creates a contemporaneous transcript, which has errors and is not the official record, but I always provide to Tony to assist in creation of the minute. So if that helps anyone consider the position, I just wanted them to know that as well.
So having gone through that, I'd certainly entertain anybody's further input at this time, and in particular, if any member of the PRAC is interested in serving.
Yeah, I'm just listening to PRAC meeting right now, but
Miles, you mind muting for a second? I'm muting him, I think. I don't know if I muted him. Anyway, are there any interested parties? Please speak now. Oh boy, I was afraid of that. All right. Shasta, thank you. Well, apparently, oh yes, Steve, please, and then Scott.
I'm not volunteering, but I wanted to ask, are we talking about all three positions or just
we'll
the
do
chair?
it. We can do it individually, whatever whatever you folks think is appropriate.
I guess,
Well, one thing I need to raise, and I apologize, Scott, I will be getting back to you. We do have a challenge here because Emily, I believe her service on the PrAC, Emily, you do not intend to continue. Is that the are you term limited? And if you aren't, is it your intention to reapply?
No, I am term limited, and it's and there was some back and forth on that because of the irregularity of start dates and things like that, and then the, some overruns, which I think I was on one of the people overrunning their limit. So no, I plan to stay involved. Like I'm very interested in helping the legislation get through and so forth, but just I need to step away from the actual responsibility. So it is not my intention to continue, although I will be happy to continue if I'm legally allowed to until a new person.
Time that you, okay, that's certainly something that I think we could entertain as well. Tony.
Yeah, that was going to be, speaking of term limits, one of my questions, because at the last meeting we discussed the flub or the confusion or something that happened with the legislature and term limits. And from what I remember hearing my name, that my term was up at the end of this year. So just for what it's worth, maybe can we table, would it be worth tabling until we know more about whose terms are up and what before elections?
I'm hoping that Todd has some insight. His hand is up.
I do, Mark. We'll be hearing from Cameron Miles soon about that. No one will be required to leave the PrAC because of term limits, even if officially you've sort of reached your original idea of a limit. The system and the process is way more flexible than that. And so no one is going to be forced to leave at any point soon. And so those that wish to stay will have the opportunity to continue to do so. Of course, then everyone has to make their individual decision as to workload and whatnot if they're able to stay. But no one's being forced off the council anytime soon. So you're good, Tony.
Okay, thank you.
And I assume that applies to Emily as well. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna make one more call. Oh, Steve, your hand's up.
Yeah, I guess I want to suggest for all, my thought for all three positions. I would support heartily renominating Mark as chair, Tony as secretary, and even though she just said no thank you, I'd like to nominate Shasta as vice chair.
All right. How shall we deal with this? Can we? Yeah, go ahead, Scott, please.
I will second Steve's motion or nomination.
All right. Well, Shasta, this is familiar territory, at least for me, I'm going to tell you.
I do have a question about term limits. I don't know. I think my term ends this year. I haven't been following that.
Mark, if it's not out of order, maybe Cameron would mind jumping in with a quick preview to just explain that everyone's okay or doesn't have to go anywhere anytime soon, and then we could get to the details after the vote.
We are in the discussion phase of the motion. Cameron. I hope you were prepared for this. Cameron, are you with us? Oh boy. Obviously, we're on hold for a moment. Cameron? All right, well, before we get to Cameron, I was going to see if there was an interest in separating all the votes or doing it on block, but I still think we need a clarification from Cameron. I'm seeing if I have his cell phone number so I can text him. I do not.
Well,
All
all
right.
I know is, I came on board 2 years ago, and I think it's a 2-year term. or something. I think we're figuring that out. I just remember, yeah. So I was hoping to come to this meeting and find out if there was a like process that I have to do to reapply or what.
Go ahead, Todd.
Oops, I probably shouldn't mute myself when I'm about to talk. Okay, so this is all unofficial, and the PrAC still has to decide if they want to accept Cameron's recommendations. But looking at this sort of cheat sheet he created for our meeting to discuss terms, if the PrAC accepts his recommendation, which I agree with, Shasta, your term would go through December of 2026 under a revised plan to standardize everyone's time on the PrAC and bring it into alignment with most other councils and committees that have 2-year terms. Because some of us started, or some of you guys started with 4-year terms, some had 2. We staggered them once the PrAC became a permanent body, but that was only for the initial period after the PrAC got rid of its sunset clause. And so it's been very confusing, and I like Cameron's plan to standardize everyone's terms moving forward, and it would give everyone who wants it additional time on the PrAC, including those who are potentially going to serve in these leadership roles. So short answer is don't worry about it right now. You're okay. And Cameron could talk through some more details when he's available.
All right, there is a motion on the table. We have a second. Is there further discussion? And I do, before I perhaps seek a vote on this, want to give Shasta a quick opportunity to share any thoughts that she may have, knowing that I was put in the same position approximately 2 years ago.
Well, I'm honored with the nomination and definitely feeling hoping it's not going to be a ton of work, but I do have a passion for this topic. So
Shasta, I can assure you that we'll keep it as we'll try to avoid taking a lot of time. As a matter of fact, I think Emily would agree that there really isn't much of a large time commitment in this role.
okay.
All
Well,
right.
then
You accept?
Mhm.
Look, how I saw a smile. I'm going to take that as acceptance. All right. We have a motion on the table. It's been seconded. I guess we should, maybe this one should be a roll call, Todd, just because it is an official action and we should probably get everybody on the record.
Sure. All right, starting in no particular order. Tony, and just a reminder, we're voting on the full slate of candidates.
Thank you.
Aye, yes.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Aye.
Thank you. Scott?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
Thank you. Steve?
Aye.
Thank you. Emily?
Aye.
Thank you. Shasta?
aye.
Thank you. Mark?
Aye for Emily and for Shasta and Tony. Yes, aye.
Are you abstaining for yourself?
That's right.
Well, thanks. And then I vote aye for the full slate. Congratulations, everyone.
All right. Thank you. Took a little longer than I expected, and the outcome wasn't what I had hoped for, but we'll go with it. Okay. Thank you, everybody. We'll look to the next item on our calendar or our agenda, and that's the formation of a bylaw subcommittee, starting with the Public Records Advocate appointment process. Todd, let's have a bit of a backgrounder discussion before we delve too much into this agenda item. Thank you.
Sure, Mark. Thank you. Well, to start off, the council has been operating more by tradition or custom rather than bylaws. As the Office of the Public Records Advocate becomes an official state agency and continues to develop processes around that, it seemed like a good idea for the council to develop its own standardized processes, including for things.
Oops. All right, everybody hold for a minute. It appears that Todd has a connection problem.
The power went in and out this morning too, so I don't know if that's the issue with the weather.
Yeah, I just texted him as well. See if we can reestablish connection. He can see and hear all of us. That's good. Still trying to, you're on mute now, Todd. Still do not hear you. All right, he'll be calling in, so just stay tuned, everybody. Sorry, we're having more technical difficulties today than I think we ever have. Well, I hope everybody's been wearing their life jackets these last few days.
We have a leak in our roof right now that we're trying to figure out.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Shasta. I'm sure there are a lot of basements that are becoming moist as well. Todd, we're still hoping that you can join us. Let's see. Was that something? I can see. Try calling now. Well, I'm sorry, everybody, for these technical difficulties. Todd, if you can hear us, are you trying to call in? Oh, here we go.
Hi, everybody.
There he is. We got you.
So sorry about that.
No worries. Glad you're back with us.
Thank you. I'm going to mute my computer so I don't get a stereo effect. Well, it doesn't seem to be working. Do you hear me double or just regular?
There might be a small echo there. Are people getting an echo? Go ahead, Todd. I think we're okay.
Okay, good. Sorry again. Okay, so let me just cut to the chase. The council needs bylaws to regulate its actions. I'm recommending you start with the reappointment of the public records advocate because I'm appointed to a 4-year term that ends on October 31st of next year. And it makes sense to decide in advance how that will be addressed, including my potential reappointment, or if you choose to hire another candidate. Either way, I think you should take some time to figure that process out in advance. And it makes sense to standardize it for future council members.
Agreed. So Todd, in your view, let me just follow up with a question. We've been in operation now for good part of what now, 4 years, and we still, when we originally began these meetings, we did identify the need for a bylaw subcommittee. However, that for whatever reason sort of fell to the cutting floor. But because Todd's term is up, as he said, in October, Todd, is it your intent for this bylaw committee to establish bylaws, and the first of those bylaws would be how the PrAC goes about either reappointing or whatnot. Is that correct?
That would be my recommendation, because the PrAC now has complete autonomy in choosing or terminating the advocate. The advocate still has a 4-year term, can only be removed for cause, but nevertheless, those terms end, and you have to consider their subsequent employment or the employment of someone else. And, there's a lot that can go into that, including regulations regarding, hiring and stuff like that. And so I think it's best to understand ahead of time what you want that process to look like. It could be incredibly informal, or it could be very formal, but I think the council, minus me, should come to some sort of agreement about what that process should look like. Like, for instance, you consider reappointment first if the person in the role is interested, and then move to hiring if that's not the case, or do you just sort of consider it whole cloth? Like, these are the kinds of questions you should be asking of yourselves.
Yes, Steve, please.
So I think it would be ideal to have a process laid out. I wonder whether, the process of developing a process could take a while, and October is will be upon us pretty quickly. So I wonder either whether we should look to the formation of an appointment committee or subcommittee, and sort of look to formalizing the process after we've had that experience, or at least if we are going to create a bylaw, I think it should be really simple and broad and give a lot of leeway to the chair of that committee. I'm just worried about the amount of time involved process.
I'm going to also raise my hand here physically. There is one other agency, I believe, that has a completely independent executive director, and that's the Oregon Government Ethics Commission, if I recall correctly. I'm getting a head nod from Senator Thatcher, so I feel somewhat confident in saying that. I would be interested in knowing their process as well. I'm a big believer that there's no reason to reinvent the wheel if it's already been invented. And so if they already have a process, I'd be curious to know what that process is and what it entails. I tend to agree with Todd's sort of reaction in that we haven't done this before. I'd like to learn about the other agency processes that have similar, that are similarly situated. But I tend to agree that going down this road, we want to be as flexible as possible, and also be able to modify our bylaws to adjust accordingly. Having said that, is there any other feedback at this point?
Mark, I have one other suggestion.
Please, go ahead. Yes, please.
So the long-term care ombudsman is, I think, the only other agency director that also is appointed to a 4-year term and can only be removed for cause. And I believe they too are appointed by their council or committee. So you may want to look to them as well for help, for guidance.
Great. All right. So so are there any other questions, comments? The couple of other things that I think we need to do in our bylaws is just lay out how we, some of the fundamental principles that we've been all abiding by. For example, using, I guess we've never referred to them, but the parliamentary procedures, what is it, Black's, it's not, I'm turning to our esteemed attorney Representative Anderson, our parliamentary rules that we've generally abided by. We'll probably want to put that into our bylaws, things of that nature. Having said that, perhaps we need to identify those who would be interested in doing so or participating in a bylaw subcommittee for the purposes of not only putting general parameters around the review of the public records advocate, but also to address procedural daily matters of the PrAC. Representative Anderson.
I would be happy to serve on that committee since I think Todd's a lawyer, but other than that, and I suspect it will be relatively easy because we will look at the other commissions and there are rules that we don't have to reinvent. So I would be happy to serve on that committee as long as Todd is going to be there too.
Todd, I see you're in the queue, and I know that that question was sort of directed to you. If you want to respond, that'd be great, and then I'll get to Scott.
Thanks. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. Actually, Rep. Anderson, I don't think I should be on the committee regarding the advocate's reappointment because I'll likely be a candidate at that point. So it's probably best that I don't participate in the process. Although if I could advise informally in terms of process and procedure, but not substance.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree with that. I would like Todd to be a part of the non-hiring process bylaws, but I would welcome, of course, his input on that, but tend to agree. Scott?
I was just going to echo Representative Anderson and express interest in serving on the bylaws committee. I've worked a little bit in bylaws creation here at the city and have developed some templates for bylaws, and I'm not sure they exactly match up with state level stuff, but the others have invented the wheel. We don't need to reinvent it. Just borrow and make it match our needs. So I'm game for joining.
I think that we just may have found our co-chair of the bylaw committee. Are there others who would be interested? I'm happy to do so. I see Andrea raise her hand. Tony, are you expressing interest in participating? I think it would be good to have that that flexibility. Is there a member of the media that would also like to join? I'd like to have that balance and by the way, I would just say that any member of the PRAC can attend and participate in these meetings. They're not exclusive to those who would be volunteering today. Looking for media. Well, if you don't volunteer, you get voluntold. I know that the media folks are always extraordinarily busy. That's not to say that all of us other regular folks aren't either. We would enjoy to have somebody from the media on there. So what I have is Rep. Anderson, Andrea, Scott, Tony, and perhaps I'll just volunteer myself as well. Just as the newly elected chair to monitor how we're making progress, I guess. Emily, please.
I mean, if I took a committee position, would that automatically get handed over to my replacement? No. Okay. So.
Well, I imagine if your replacement was interested in serving on that, yeah, absolutely. I don't want to force anybody to do anything against their will, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Tony.
Sorry, I left that hand up.
Okay. Legacy hand. And Representative Anderson.
Yeah, thank you very much. It appears to me, and maybe Todd can confirm this, that the senator and I are ex officio members, which is why we haven't voted on anything, and which is what I thought. So I would be participating in this as an ex officio member, and I'm not so much interested in how we deal with what we do about a new director or continuing the same director. I'm just interested on the process of how we get bylaws, and I think those are two separate issues. So in terms of how we look at the bylaws, I would welcome any help that Todd could give us, because that's a process procedure issue, not a substantive issue of who we're going to hire to fill that position.
Indeed. Understood, and thank you for that, making that point. Steve?
I had a question for Representative Anderson. Would it be possible, or would you envision creating a set of bylaws for the appointment process? I mean, could we do that on its own, or do we have to create a full set of bylaws before we can proceed with the selection process?
Well, I'd have to look at the statutory authority that was given to this commission, but I believe that the chair was saying we could be as formal or as informal as we want. So it could just be the committee or the commission, whatever we're called, the task force as a whole can just make a motion to hire somebody without as long as we follow, the state required hiring process procedures. That'd be my guess.
Yeah. Oh, Senator Thatcher, please.
Yeah, I just want to correct myself and maybe you a little bit on the appointment process for the Ethics Commission is still appointed by the governor and then confirmed.
Oh, okay.
And the long-term care ombudsman is probably a better comparison. And I think what Representative Anderson was saying is very much, well, just looking at the ORS for the long-term care ombudsman, very much in line with what they do. So, yeah.
Okay. So it will be our intention to look at what the long-term ombudsman's process is. And to Representative Anderson's sort of question, I agree, Representative Anderson, that we could do bylaws on the hiring process separately from the ministerial issues that this council works under. So we can certainly bifurcate those two topics. So, all right. I have Rep. Anderson, Andrea, Scott, Tony, and myself who have volunteered to serve on the bylaw committee. Did I miss anybody? I don't think we need a formal vote on this, but we do need it to be reflected in the meetings. I would like to perhaps, I'm almost tempted to nominate Scott as the chair. Scott, would that be a friendly, would you consider that to be a friendly proposal?
I would indeed.
Okay, very good.
To be friendly.
I appreciate your response. I would also perhaps make a motion then that we approve the list of individuals I mentioned with Scott Stauffer as the chair of the bylaw committee. Is there a second?
Second.
I think I heard Andrea as a second. Discussion.
Yay, bylaws.
All right. I think we can do this unanimously by voice vote. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we have a bylaw committee. Thank you, everybody. That's great. We've made progress. All right. Next item, presentation on ideas to standardize council terms. This one I have Cameron and Todd up for the discussion. Oh, and before I do that, Senator Thatcher, is that a legacy hand up or do you have something new?
Brand new, but I just kind of wanted to slip it in between because I need to further correct myself. If you look at the long-term care ombudsman, they are still appointed by the governor, but it's the long-term care ombudsman and the residential ombudsman, which I don't ever heard of before. Anyway, that appoints an Oregon public guardian conservator. So that would be the more of the, I guess, analogy that you might want to look at. So yeah, there I am. Hopefully I won't have to correct myself again.
and we'll make sure that the notes reflect that. And I would probably lean towards Todd. I know that you are not serving on the bylaw subcommittee, but I think the bylaw subcommittee will need to reach out to that particular agency to see how to see whether we can get a copy of their bylaws and perhaps somebody who's familiar with their process to come and address the bylaw committee at the appropriate time.
It would be my pleasure to connect them and Scott so they can plan accordingly.
Perfect. All right, that sounds great. Thank you for that, Senator Thatcher. All right, I think we're on terms now. So Cameron and Todd, if you wouldn't mind taking it away, thank you.
Do you want to start or do you want me to start?
No, Cameron, since this is really the governor's process, and I agree with your suggestions, but you're more knowledgeable in the process than I am more than happy to support you, but I'd like to hear what you have to say about it.
Okay. So I'm sharing my screen now, and hopefully you can see where we're at with the current terms. These are just for the governor appointed terms. The next term, the last column, and I need to clarify that column. So let me back up, I'm sorry. In 2017, this committee was created, and there was no term limits for the individuals. In 2019, they established 2-year terms, but to get the terms staggered, they started everyone retroactively with 3- and 4-year terms. The system we use for appointments doesn't allow us to say this is a 4-year term and then it becomes a 2-year term, or this is a 3-year term and then it becomes a 2-year term. So that was set up with hope that in a few years someone remembered that they needed to change the system going forward. That did not happen. So what ended up happening is people were being appointed to terms that were longer than their 2-year terms. And the Senate was confirming them for the most part, but sometimes catching it and adjusting terms appropriately. But I don't think our office, I wasn't there, there's been changeover since, but I don't think our office was ever let know that there was a problem there. They just changed the terms. So what we ended up happening is what's under the current Senate confirmed terms. You'll notice they go everywhere from 2 to 4 years. And then so the last term, where it says next term, is had the law worked as it was as they intended in 2019, had it gone forward and there had been 2-year terms, that's where we'd be at today. There's nothing that requires that, but that's if everyone had filled complete terms, the right terms have been appointed and everything had gone forward, that's where we'd be at. And you notice the key thing about it is half the terms expire in odd number of years and half expire in even number of years. Media members expire on different years. Public members, I mean, it's designed to keep the same type of representatives when the other term expires. So now we have the current Senate confirmed terms, which come nowhere near to matching that. They expire mid-year. Generally, when you put someone in middle of a term, they're appointed to the 2-year term that they were supposed to be part of, rather than giving them a 2-year term that starts and ends in the middle of a year. So what Todd and I talked about and what we're proposing is that we move back to half are expiring on odd numbers, half are expiring even numbers. They all expire in January. And when someone leaves midterm, we continue that process of appointing them to 2-year terms that match what was basically what was intended originally, so that we don't have excess turnover and we're not changing people mid-year, other than if someone resigns and we have no choice. So the proposed system would require us to go ahead and everyone that has a proposed term starting in 2024, we would need them to reapply like immediately this week. And then we can get them on we have some process and requirements for advance notice to the Senate and public notification. So we can get them on the next round of appointments if we get their applications this week. We're a little past the deadline, but we're close enough that our office can manage it. So that's what we propose, that if you're in a position that has the proposed next term starting in January, we reappoint you. If you're not, then we'll reappoint at that time that the next one comes up. You'll notice that some of them like will end in June of 25, and we don't suggest reappointing till January of 26, for example, with Emily Goddard. There's nothing that prevents us from leaving someone in past their term. It's not best practices, but there's also nothing until a replacement is appointed. There's nothing that prevents them from serving out to get us back on track. So that's what we propose. If you have any questions, I see a hand from Mark. First, anyways, happy to answer any questions you have. And you are muted.
There's always one of us. So actually, I have two questions here, Cameron, and thank you for this. So first of all, who are the individuals who would have to reapply this week? Knowing that tomorrow is Friday, are there any individuals that are in a position that have to reapply this week?
Oh,
and if so, who are they? And then tomorrow is Thursday. Forgive me. I'm one day ahead of myself. Forgive me. But my follow-up question is this, Cameron. Do we have to fix the statute to make this work the way you've outlined it, or are we in a place where we don't need to go back and fix statute? I guess that's my second question.
Okay. As to your first question, there's only two people, Emily Harris, who's not seeking reappointment, and Steve Suo, who's actually already reapplied. So I said that thinking in advance, but I forgot that we've already alleviated those problems. Your second half of that question, we do not need a statutory fix. We're going to go forward with 2-year terms. It's set up how it wanted it to be, but it didn't require that it follow that pattern. We want to follow that pattern, and that's why we're trying to get back on it, but there was no statutory requirement that we provide it. So we could have different members expiring every month of the year, and there's nothing wrong with it. We just don't think that's best for the council.
I know I'm still on mute. Steve, please.
Cameron, I had two questions also. What about there's some members missing here that Michael Crone, Andrea, and the Secretary of State's representative. Are they not term limited, or how does that work?
No.
They are appointed by other people. That the Secretary of State appoints them, Attorney General appoints Michael. The governor's office doesn't appoint them, and they don't have, I don't believe they even have, I think they do technically have terms, but as long as they're representing an elected official, we don't, there's nothing that requires them to be on terms of any type.
Okay. And my second question was, what about Tony? His term is expiring at the end of this month. Doesn't he need to reapply?
So Tony is a special case. He was actually appointed in June of this year to a term that ends end of this year. There was a mistake there. So his term should have been a different term than what he was appointed to in the first place. We're not sure how that happened, honestly. He should have been appointed to a term that would have ended in 25 anyways. It's weird that he was appointed in June to a term that started 1.5 years earlier.
So if I may interject, how do we get that rectified, or is it rectified, Cameron?
So actually, he was appointed to a term that ends in 25. The Senate confirmed him to a different term than he was appointed to, which is we think would consider it like a ministerial error, and we don't think it needs to be fixed. But even if it was something that was substantive and needed to be fixed, it can also be ignored due to the fact that as long as we don't appoint someone else prior to that time, he can serve until we appoint someone else.
So we're comfortable in that Tony will be a member of the PrAC until 2025. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes. Having said that, I personally, although there's no requirement, I personally think it would be better to have him reapply and appoint him to that new 2-year term. It's not required. And again, I'm not going to make him do it. It's not me anyways. It's the governor's not going to make him do it. If you don't feel that you want to make him do it, if you think to be proper and you want to do it that way, we have no problem just reappointing. We'll just blank check reappoint. If you say, yeah, he should be reappointed for that term, we will turn around and we will say yes, and we will reappoint him, and he will serve until that 2025 regardless.
So forgive me, everybody, for going out of order here. I see that Todd and Shasta have their hands up, but I just want to quickly go to Tony. Tony, reaction, response, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem scrambling to fill out an application. But you asked the same question, Mark, that I was going to ask, is like, who needs to apply early? And then he said Emily and Steve. So I lowered my hand, thinking, yeah. So, anyways, happy to do it. Just is there an actual application? I don't remember how I did it last year, but if that can just be sent over or a link or however it works, so I can get that done.
It's through Workday. It probably only takes about 5 or 10 minutes. So it would be quick and easy if that's what the council thinks should happen. That, I mean, we're more than happy to go along with that. We just don't think it's really necessary to put him through the process if the council in general doesn't want to put him through it.
Okay. Well, it just to me seems like the cleanest way. If there was an error, and it only takes 5 minutes, I'm happy to do it. Just I'll after the meeting, Todd and Cameron, I'll email you just so that you guys can send me a link to, because I don't know what Workday is.
So just as a follow-up, Todd, if you and your team can be sure to get that link to Tony, that would be great. I'm going to go in order now. So Todd, please.
Well, actually, one of the things I was going to bring up, I was going to ask Cameron to tell anyone who's listening, or Miles rather, sorry, anyone who's listening, Cameron, God, sorry, anyone who's listening to this meeting, or later to the recording that's interested in serving on the council through a governor-appointed process, how that process works. I thought it was a link on the governor's website. I wasn't actually aware of the Workday aspect, so maybe we could just get a commentary on that. And then I'm probably going to talk about what something that is the reason Shasta has her hand up, which is that, so based on the proposed next term, she would essentially be the only one, I guess, officially out of rotation, given the ministerial error on Tony's reappointment. That would have her as a holdover essentially for one calendar year, 2024, which again isn't really a problem because there's a lot of wiggle room in this process. But I just want to make sure her particular role is clarified to her sufficient understanding so we know how to proceed there, and the council can make sure it's comfortable if we're just going to hold over for a year, which personally I think is fine given the way things have worked so far and hasn't seemed to be an issue. Thank you.
Shasta, please.
Yeah, that question, I'm just confused about what the 2024 term is for me. Especially want to make that squared away since now I'm vice chair. So I want to make sure everything is legal and tightened up. And then I'm also, so with Emily leaving, does that make 2 vacancies on the council? Okay. So yeah, advertising those and encouraging people to apply would be great.
So let me answer both those questions. Well, yours and Todd's question. It is a link on the governor's website. It puts when you fill out the web-based form, it puts it into Workday. So I guess for us it's Workday, but for you it's a web-based form. As far as the other question, again, similar to Tony, if the council feels that Shasta should reapply to a shorter term, This would be putting her in a midterm, and that's the other, it's a little iffy. We could put her in a term that ends the end of 24, or we could do the holdover. Either way doesn't really matter to us. And so there is a vacancy on there. Will Gleason has been recommended to that position, and he was going to be up for confirmation in November, but that list hadn't been published when I prepared this form. Now it has been published, and so I can say his name out loud. So that position will be filled as soon as the Senate can confirm that.
And if I recall correctly, that is the county position.
Yes.
Thank you. I see your hand up, Steve, but I wanted to see if Shasta had any follow-up on that. Doesn't appear to, so go ahead, Steve. Thank you.
So I think Cameron is just answered my question, but just to be clear, if we went with a formal like endorsement for Shasta and Tony through the Senate, in order to get on the track that we desire with the staggered or the every other year thing, we would have them reappointed to a term of just 2024. It would be January 2024 through December 31st, 2024. Is that correct?
Yes, you're right. I'm looking up at it to make sure I'm right. You're right, but yes, yeah, that is correct.
I mean, I wouldn't be averse to doing that if, I mean, it just means Shasta and Tony have to fill out some, it's, it's manageable, the application. I can, having just done it, it's like 3 or 4 questions.
Yeah,
and I'm one who likes to try to follow the rules if we can. We are trying to be transparent. We are government for all the right reasons. We should probably dot the I's and cross the T's.
So it is a little more than an application because it does have to go through the Senate.
Right.
If requested, they may have to appear, although usually that's only the first time around. But I mean, it is a little more than just an application, but not sufficient, not significantly more.
And knowing that Senator Thatcher sits on that august Rules Committee, or at least has been in the, oh, you're no longer on it, are you? Oh, my apologies. Oh, darn. Well, I was going to say you would have a friendly audience, but now I can't say that. Yeah, so I mean, my inclination is that if Tony and who was it? It was Shasta, would go through the actual formal process of the reapplying, Cameron, that will get us sort of back into the saddle properly with everybody. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes.
Well, I would simply encourage Tony and Shasta to take a few moments of their time before Friday, seeing as though it's Wednesday, to get that completed. Cameron and Todd, are there any other items that you wanted to raise at this point?
No, I don't have any. Thank you.
Are there further questions from the council? Okay, so we've apparently dispensed of that item. Thank you for that, Cameron and Todd. Now we're on agenda item number 6, Public Records Advocate Training and Assistance Report. As many of you will recall, the purpose of the creation of the Public Records Advocate was to provide mediation between parties who are having public records disputes. And another major function of the Public Records Advocate was to provide training to the public and to government and to anybody else who will listen. And we have not received a report from Todd for some time. I know he and his staff have been very busy And we're going to take that report now. Todd, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, as previously discussed, we decided to have me do these presentations during our full council meetings. It seems to be shaken out to about twice a year, which I think is a pretty good amount of time to sort of demonstrate what the office has been up to in between those meetings. I'm going to share my screen in a moment and go over the numbers and some breakdowns of them as well. So let me pull up the presentation. Okay, hopefully at this point you are all seeing the PowerPoint presentation. Great. So I thought it was important to start with an overview of the entire year. And in fact, that's what these numbers will be instead of talking about what's gone on since the last meeting, since it's the end of the year. And it's been so long since I've had the opportunity to talk to you about our work. I've went ahead and encapsulated everything from January 1st through the end of this year. And therefore, as a point of comparison, I started with our overall numbers. As Mark mentioned, we have two core fundamental duties. One is mediation, which we call requests for assistance, or RFAs, where we assist public records custodians and requesters to resolve disputed public records requests, whether that's working towards disclosure of records or merely explaining to records custodians what the law requires so that they can more adequately decide which records to disclose, or sometimes explaining to requesters why the law doesn't require or permit public bodies to disclose records. But each of those are individual requests for assistance. And as you can see from the numbers here, we've continued to receive more and more as time has gone on. In 2018, the office was only in existence for about 8 months of that year, and we received 101. The numbers continue to steadily increase in 2019. We saw a dip in 2020 that was undoubtedly in response to the COVID pandemic and most people being focused on dealing with that. Our numbers rebounded immediately in 2021, and it looks like we'll close out 2023 probably well over 270 or 80 requests for assistance. Just since I completed this report late Monday, I've received at least 3 more requests for assistance. So I find this number both scary and heartening. It's scary because there are only 2 of us, and unsurprisingly, perhaps, handling RFAs takes up the majority of our work every day, which is, of course, very important, and it just makes it hard sometimes to look at longer term or bigger projects because we're constantly hands-on trying to help people with these individual requests, which matter, but is very time-consuming. Moving to the next slide, as you might recall, in response to really good questions from this council about what the data meant from a previous report, starting on January 1st of this year, I've decided to track or break down our request for assistance into 10 elements so we could get into a little bit more granular data in terms of what we were showing by tracking our information. And so there's things, of course, like the date the request is received, the name of the requester, who the requester is, because we get requests for assistance from both public bodies and members of the public, sometimes both for a single request, but I generally note who initiated the request, who contacted us first, in other words, about a problematic request, and count them in that category. We talk about the nature of dispute, the ORS sections at issue. As you've all experienced, the public records law is quite broad and deep and pulls in other laws. And so I think it's a good idea at some point, perhaps, to try to distill which areas of the law are most problematic to perhaps inform things like our legislative work on this council. Although at this point, that's well beyond our capacity. We put down who the RFA is assigned to, since there's 2 of us now to figure out who's handling what. And we like to note how the issue is resolved, including we have an unofficial office policy. If we've communicated with the requester and they haven't responded to us, we generally consider that request for assistance closed within 30 days if we're unable to work on it. Although, of course, no request for assistance that is appropriate is ever refused or turned away. So if the requester returns to us later, we, of course, continue helping them, although we most likely count that as a new request for assistance as long as they actually continue to communicate with us and offer us the information we need to assist them. So having said all that, here's how I've broken down the numbers so far for 2023 up until this Monday. We've had 191 requests for assistance that have come from members of the public. That's both the media and the general public. As you can see, the general public has provided the lion's share of requests for assistance, which shows our office is doing exactly what it's supposed to, which is helping records requesters with problematic disputes. An upside of our work is you'll see that 73 requests for assistance have actually come from public bodies, which I think is amazing and demonstrates their understanding of us as a independent, knowledgeable third party that can assist them resolve disputed public records requests. And interestingly enough, although we have absolutely no authority to require local governments to participate in our process, they are by far the largest type of government that has contacted us themselves for assistance. And I think that might be borne in part by our trainings, as you'll see on the next screen. A lot of our trainings have been done for local governments and local government professional organizations that bring public employees from across different types of governments together at annual conventions, and we repeatedly present on the public records law at those conventions or convenings or meetings or conferences or whatever you want to call them. And we generally get calls afterwards from many people in the audience to assist them with crafting or updating their public records policy, and also, now that they know we exist, helping them with disputed public records requests. We've managed to close out 219 of those 263 requests for assistance we've received so far in this year. 30 of those were closed because the requester was not responsive to our request for additional information within 30 days. And it could literally be like someone will email us and say, hey, you know, they're not responding to my records request. They won't tell me like who they are, what records are being sought, what steps they've taken so far. And so we just ask back, or we respond back with clarifying questions, and sometimes, unfortunately, never hear again from the requester who sought our help. And I think it's important to note that we work very hard to meet people where they're at. So if someone calls us, we will call them back, even if we have an email address. If someone emails us for assistance, we will email them back, sometimes followed up by a phone call if we have their information available, because people approach government, including our office, with just differing levels of authority and knowledge and trust in the government and the process. And so we want to make clear to them as much as possible that we're here to assist. And that's just been our custom so far.
Hey, Todd.
Yes,
I don't
go
know
ahead,
if
Mark.
I apologize for interrupting. I don't know if you can see there is a hand raised from Andrea, and so forgive me for interrupting you, but Andrea appears to have a question.
No, thank you, Mark. I actually missed that, and I should have said at the outset, please feel free to ask questions throughout. So Andrea, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, how do you typically receive these requests for assistance? And like, is there a form you have people fill out, or is it just kind of question and answer back and forth?
No, that's a great question, and I probably should have broke that down at the outset. We offer multiple channels for people to contact the office. So we have a general email inbox where people can send questions. We have an online form that people can click on and fill out information. People can contact me directly. People can contact Yufeng, the Deputy Public Records Advocate, directly. We generally also, or we have over the years, assisted many adults in custody. So we will also receive handwritten letters that we now use a third-party mail service that scans the mail, and then I could download it as a PDF. Then I respond in writing to those that need us to respond in writing. And it's interesting because sometimes people that we've never heard of but have somehow heard about either myself or Yufeng will then just reach out to us directly and say, oh, I have this question. And so we just initiate a conversation through the means by which they've reached out to us. And then, of course, we make sure to note it in our log to track our cases. But to your point, and this is something I talk about in my trainings as well, we provide as many channels of communication as possible that we are capable of adequately monitoring. So right now, that is all those that I've mentioned so far.
Thanks.
And so some of these numbers were actually a surprise for me. We've managed to resolve 53 out of 219 requests for assistance on the same day they were received. Sometimes it's as easy as just shooting back an answer that I know, or taking a little time to research the question and then putting the answer into an email, which is a much higher number than I actually expected it to be once I broke down the figures. So I think that demonstrates that some of our work really is just answering questions, alleviating people's concerns, and offering them a little direction and guidance. It doesn't have to be an in-depth, like, researched memo or a policy, but just says, oh yeah, you're on the right track, or here's the way I think you should go, and doesn't take that much time. Almost all of our other requests for assistance that have been closed, we've been able to resolve somewhere between 1 and 38 days. I did note the number 82 there because that is one outlier that took that long to resolve, because as I worked with this individual on her public records request, we actually had to follow a path of information through several different local governments to finally find the record she was seeking, to communicate with that government, to get them to respond to us, and to resolve her public records request. Even the ones that take longer, sometimes it's a question of they reach out to us, and just given our workload and the fact that we attempt to answer the request for assistance in the order they are received, takes a little while to get back to them. Sometimes it takes time for them to get back to us with the information we need to assist them. Sometimes it takes a while to set up a phone call or a Teams meeting with the government at issue, or sometimes it takes several emails back and forth or a phone call to actually figure out what the requester is looking for. Unfortunately, in line with the technological issues I had earlier, sometimes we also find requests for assistance that come in through our online portal in our general email inbox junk folder, which is a very disappointing thing to have realized. And I haven't been able to figure out what they have in common that causes that to occur. But as a result, now that we're aware that that is happening, I check both my work email and our general inbox email junk folder every day. And whatever caused the problem seems to be declining, but I do still periodically find some requests for assistance from our online portal, which I should mention then automatically gets sent to the office inbox in junk mail. So we're continuing to monitor that problem, and I hope that will help the outside number on the range come down a little bit. And finally, we have 15 requests for assistance currently open, not counting those that we received in the last couple of days. Some of those are nearing 30 days because the requester just hasn't gotten back to us despite our efforts to reach out. Others represent ongoing work with both requesters and records custodians to resolve the dispute. So before I move on to trainings, let me pause here and see if anyone has any questions.
Questions. I actually will have one, but want to make sure that everybody else has an opportunity to ask any questions. Senator Thatcher, please.
It kind of surprised me that you have government coming to you. And I think it sounds like there's probably two types of requests. There's the people requesting the information, and then it sounds like there's a body that's not sure maybe how to fulfill that request, maybe. And I don't know that, but can we assume that any state government or local government are on the request E end? Or, I mean, sometimes it can, I know I've probably had some questions for you trying to get something out of another government agency. So I'm just wondering how that breaks out, just, you know, from your memory.
No, absolutely. Good question, Senator Thatcher. Yeah, state and local governments will contact me and say, like, hey, Todd, like, we have this public records request. We think these exemptions might apply. We're not sure how to charge fees. The requester keeps emailing us questions. We don't know how to answer them. Whatever issues you could think of that a requester might experience with a public records request, the records custodians often experience those issues too. And it is generally in response to a problematic public records request. But it could also be that they're anticipating certain issues, they're attempting to update their policy, or things like that, that we consider requests for assistance as well, and will log as individual requests from a local, state or local government. And, you know, again, I'm not going to pat myself on the back, but I think it demonstrates that word is spreading, that we are a trusted resource that can assist with, you know, the public records process, whatever that may be. And I spend a lot of times telling requesters and public bodies, it's not going to turn out the way they want it to be, but I hope it seems to be the case that they're still accepting of our information offered in the spirit of assistance, even if it's not the answer that they want to hear.
Great. Other questions? So I actually do have a question, Todd, because first of all, this is really helpful, and I think it demonstrates the utility of the creation of this position, because if I look at some of the numbers, boy, there was a lot of potential litigation that was avoided. And I know that doesn't make Representative Anderson very happy, being a trial lawyer, but avoided litigation saves not only the public money, but individuals' money. And that's always, I think, a good outcome. Having said that, though, Todd, that seemed to have spurred a bunch of new questions. I apologize. One of the things I'm curious about, though, Todd, is whether or not your office has thought about customer satisfaction surveys after the fact. I'm just curious to know what people are thinking who have sought this service from your office, how they feel about the services that were rendered, whether there are things that could be improved, or where the real strong assistance was received. I'd just be curious to know whether or not you're seeking feedback from the folks who are actually approaching the office for assistance. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. So something else that's happening with the office is we're continuing to develop as a state agency with standardized processes and procedures. And one of those is coming up with KPMs, or key performance measures, that are reported to the legislature, I believe, along with the budget process. And we've discussed doing customer satisfaction surveys in conjunction with our trainings. That seems like a little bit of an easier environment. You have a captive audience. They've chosen to be there for your trainings. They're directly plugged into the materials we have to provide, and it's a large group of people at a time. We haven't discussed the possibility of doing it yet for requests for assistance, but it's certainly a process I'd be open to exploring, especially once we've gotten through establishing the KPMs we've already agreed to with the Legislative Fiscal Office, and then moving on to ways to further develop our office. And look, let me say, as I kind of mentioned earlier, with only 2 of us, there's so many more things I'd like to be able to do with this office that we just can't right now. And one thing we're going to attempt for, I think, the 3rd time is requesting additional staff so that we can expand some of our data capturing, but also services that we could offer. And I think a good connection to that would be starting to interface more with requesters or those who submit RFAs after the fact to see where we're succeeding and where we can do better.
Thank you for that, Todd. Scott.
Thank you. Just want to say to you and you, Fang, Todd, I hear from my city colleagues that they really appreciate having your office as a resource. And I will say that I know, as reported here, governments are coming to you for help, but we also, those who respond to records requests at local level, have at times found it helpful to refer members of the public to you too when they come to us for different questions. So I think kind of a 2-way to come at it from there. But I had one question, and I don't know if there's any data out there on this, but do you have any idea or sense how your numbers seem to stack up against other similar positions in other states? Does this seem to be on par? Is this still in a ramp up? Is there an answer to that question?
I definitely don't have one. That's something I would love to look into. I know Connecticut and Massachusetts have really robust systems. And I will say, as an aside, they're way more well-funded than we are, even though Oregon has a much larger population for this work. So I would love to do some comparing and contrasting to the extent we can line up our duties. But no, I have not had the ability to do so yet, nor have I had feedback from counterparts in other states about that. We go to some of these conferences where we meet others from out of state and we sort of share information anecdotally, but no hard numbers to line up with each other yet.
Thank you.
Great. Emily.
Oh, sorry. And I just will say, Scott, I'm glad local governments are finding our services helpful. I really enjoy working with them. I find everyone doing public records work dedicated to it, but at the local government level, you have people who really sort of understand the law and are trying to get out as much information as possible. So it's been educational for me to work with them too.
Emily.
Sorry. Yes.
Thanks. Todd, I just wondered if you did like additional cross tabulation. I really appreciate this overarching summary, and it's really interesting. But I wonder if you did cross tabulation or further details about like what kinds of requests took longer to resolve, or how quickly, like was the you know, of the 53 that got the same day resolution, was that the general public, hopefully, or, you know, anything like that, looking a little deeper.
Yeah, Emily, as I was working on this, I was asking myself those very same questions and basically saying, wow, I would love to break this down even further, but frankly, it's a bandwidth issue. I just did not have the opportunity to go deeper. These are questions I'd like to figure out at some point, but I just haven't gotten there yet.
Great, thank you. And Shasta, please.
Hi there. Yeah, so I think it's really great. I know it makes you guys really busy to have so many requests, but it definitely shows me that a job like this is needed. I think that when we were envisioning the role, having a central clearinghouse in the state to be able to field these requests, just by the pure numbers, shows how important it is that there is, kind of a neutral party that's able to arbitrate these things and to offer advice and processes. I was distracted earlier, and so I don't know if you talked about kind of the data on the nature of the disputes and what sort of actions it took to resolve them.
No, that's great. And I don't want to sound like I was complaining. Requests for assistance are our core duty. And I actually maybe I was complaining, but I really do enjoy doing them. It is the most important work we do in this office. It's like the bread and butter of why we exist. So it's satisfying that we are getting so many individual requests for assistance. When I discussed nature of the dispute, I didn't get into details. It's basically a quick summary of what's at issue. So it'll be, requester challenges public body's refusal to offer, public interest fee waiver. So it's just a quick description in one field of our Excel spreadsheet where we track these that discusses what happens. And then in terms of resolution, if things occur over multiple dates, we generally try to track like what we did on what date, telephone call to this person, Teams meeting with public body to discuss relevant exemptions. And then we'll have a separate box that just lists the overall resolution, or at least, because we don't always know what happens in these requests for assistance, right? Like we'll end up having spoken to a requester at length about how do you request public interest fee waiver, and maybe I'll direct them to the Department of Administrative Services online policy, not because it would be binding on the local government they're working with, but because it's a great encapsulation of the questions or how they should break down their request for assistance or what the public body should be considering when making that determination. So we'll offer all this advice, and if they don't want anything else from us, they'll say thank you and they'll go. And we don't necessarily get to know how these issues are resolved. It's kind of like what I tell public bodies about public records requests. Like the nature of our law is one of disclosure, not confidentiality. So if they get an anonymized public records request, say through like muckrock.com with some unrecognizable email address, and they provide records and aren't challenged on the records that are withheld, and the fees are paid in full, the requester gets to go with those records, and they never get to know like who the requester was and what they're going to do with those records. And that's hard sometimes for public employees to accept because, they care about where they work and the information they disclose. Well, for me, I feel a lot of that angst sometimes too, because I'm very curious about how some of these issues turn out, but that's not really the nature of my role in some of these requests. It's merely to provide the information, advice, or guidance requested, and then I kind of have to step back and leave it alone. Now, along Mark's suggestion, if at some point we're able to maybe send out like randomized customer satisfaction surveys after the fact, well, certainly one of the questions would probably be, and was your issue resolved? How is it resolved? But for now, we have to stand in this weird place of being these like roving public records experts, but never often getting to see the outcome of our work. And I'm getting very philosophical, but it's really sort of how it breaks down.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. One of the, I think another one of the visions for this role was somebody who would be in a position to kind of identify some systemic issues and some, particularly vexatious requesters or particularly vexatious agencies. And so I don't know if your, experience has led you to any sort of conclusions about, any sort of policies or barriers that exist in the state of Oregon.
Yeah, that's fair. I will say when I was working with this council to come up with a legislative concept that ultimately became SB 417, my experiences greatly informed the suggestions I had for a model law, some of which made it into the final version of the bill that we introduced last session, because those seem like both some of the biggest overarching issues and those that might have sort of the most directly approachable resolutions, including just clarifying language, establishing common language, requiring public bodies to essentially show their work in the public records process, and clarifying the public interest fee waiver or significant reduction process. The truth is, with the amount of public requests for assistance we receive, any issue you can imagine we've experienced when it comes to public records requests. And so my view has been more about systemic issues rather than individual actors, because I think it's more about shoring up the safeguards in the law and clarifying the process, and then making sure that requesters have an adequate recourse to deal with problematic agencies. It's hard to target one or more specific public body to improve their process if we don't have the requirements in place that they're supposed to be complying with in the first place. And I will say, the office does have the ability to do grander things like white papers and templates and things like that. But again, it's, that's for longer term planning, because we just don't have the means to do that now.
Mm-hmm. I guess, does your data show, that a certain agency is something that people are most interested in requesting or finding issues with?
I mean, it's a good question. You're going to see like City of Portland, Oregon Department of Corrections, DHS come up frequently in our requests for assistance, but they're also some of the largest public bodies in Oregon. And so, of course, they're going to have a commensurate larger number of public records requests. But you could also have, a small local government that we only heard about once, but then the information you hear about them, at least anecdotally, if true, you would think, oh my God, like they're not following the public records law at all. And, how do you address that through our work? It's unclear, because, I do want public bodies to understand that we're here to assist them as much as we are requesters. And I have no authority to compel anyone outside of the executive branch of the state agency to do anything. And so I feel like if I'm doing anything other than trying to talk to them about what the law requires and offering assistance on how to do it better, they may not come to us next time and ask for help after a requester's contacted me that led to my initial conversation with them. Like, I want these public bodies, even if I've called them up on the first go to say, hey, this requester has an issue, can we talk about your process? Next time they have the issue, to feel like they could call me too and get that help. So I don't know if that adequately answers your question or not, but it's where my thinking is.
I guess a follow-up question would be, do you feel like there is a need for, somebody like you, a public records advocate, that does have authority over local agencies?
That's a good question. We're all bound by the same state law, but of course, that very same state law, since its inception in the early 1970s, and including with the reforms that occurred in 2017, recognized the variability amongst governments at the state and local level, and even within agencies at the same level, because of funding and other issues. And so there has to be some flexibility in the work that we do on public records, merely because not everyone is set up the same. But I do think there can be room for improvement. Like, for instance, the PRAC has a provision that I found very interesting that we might want to discuss in our legislative subcommittee. Right now, the way the PRAC is structured is that every public body in Oregon has to comply with its request for information, paraphrasing from the statute, to the extent that confidentiality provisions permit that. I would be interested in exploring that concept with the council and our stakeholders to see if that would make sense to add to the work of the advocate as well. Again, not necessarily to compel any public body to work with us, but at least to perhaps require them to answer me if I've reached out seeking information about a public records request. Again, not in any way required to comply with our guidance, but maybe at least to participate in a discussion about what's going on. And the only reason I think that might be viable is that it would dovetail with the current form of SB 417, which again pushes the requirements a little further on what public bodies have to report to requesters when it comes to a public records request, like a reasonable explanation of a fee estimate, put in writing if you're denying a fee waiver request in the public interest and things like that. So merely being required to tell me what's going on, I hope would not be considered too burdensome, but might allow us to further inform even just requesters about what's going on in their individual public records request process at the local level. This is a half-baked idea that's just been sitting in the back of my head for a little while, but your question brought it up, and I would be interested in exploring it further if the council wanted to.
All right, Steve, I saw that you had your hand up. It's been lowered. Did you want to ask a question? Okay.
Well, great. I have one more slide
then. Let's go to the next slide, please.
Fifth and final slide. So these are all the trainings we've conducted this year, as well as prospective ones we have scheduled into early next year through February 8th. Since they're on the calendar, I figured I would include them. They represent 20 trainings overall. And I mean, I'm just going to guesstimate here, but I mean, there has been as few as like maybe 10 people in a room and as many as probably like well over 100. So we're reaching a lot of public employees across the state government and local government level. And when I say local government, I mean all local governments, counties, cities, and special districts. You'll see a couple of these say Q&A. What I've started doing is I'll often be contacted by a record custodian that'll say something like, oh, I'm new in the role, or I've been doing this for a while, but there's just only one or two of us and we could use a little assistance. I offer them our full formal like 90-minute training, but sometimes that's just a little too much. And so I say instead, well, why don't we just meet informally over Teams, take as much time as we need, and you could basically fire as many questions at me as you want about whatever issues you're facing in the public records realm. And because this work involves a lot of the same issues, we generally end up going through most of the material from my Public Records 101 trainings anyway, but in a less formal setting that still provides them the information they need. And so I really like that process. And so I'm making sure to offer that anytime the issue of training or need for assistance comes up. And so I think we have at least a couple of those in the books already at this point.
I believe, Tony, you have a question?
Yeah, Todd, thanks. So I think it's really awesome to see the interest from public bodies in requests for assistance, and then also in receiving trainings, especially hearing that you're available to do the formal or informal Q&As. So my question, and just kind of thinking about all of the slides, not just this last one, seeing that, at the start you said, Todd, that the 260 something requests for assistance this year had increased, a good amount from the year before, like 25% or so. And then also the fact that like out of those requests, there was 130 something from the general public. Yet I'm seeing that there's trainings, private organizations are receive, it's 3 out of the 20. So I'm wondering, my question is a few questions. Out of those, I'm curious if there's a way to overall to increase the number of trainings for members of the public with the aim to maybe reduce the number of general requests, to even out maybe, because I don't know, in my mind, I thought maybe there would be more media requests than general public. And I'm curious also if there's a way, because you had the slide that where you kind of list the categories that you want to track for data, if it's possible to maybe subdivide the general public into like individual citizens versus like the Private Attorneys Association, which you taught, or maybe like a business, like a real estate business that uses public records on a daily basis, basically an individual versus like an org or business, just to maybe better track, because since I've been on the council, for me training has always been a bigger interest in me for trying to get a better advocate more for more public training, so that individuals especially can be more informed about how they can get information about themselves that are being held in public bodies. And so, yeah, so I guess my question is, do you have a couple of questions? Do you have a general sense of that breakdown of, is it individuals, or is it more like a business or an association that you're helping with through the request for assistance process? And then you mentioned, that the vast majority of your work goes towards requests for assistance versus the other component, the training. So I'm wondering, when you make your requests for more staff to the legislature, are you going to consider, I don't know if it deserves its own position, but an emphasis where the next person could help grow your outreach, I guess, or begin an outreach program for general public body or general people. So yeah, I'll just shut up there and end with those questions.
No, this is great feedback, Tony. Thank you. Well, let me start off by saying we never refuse a request for assistance. We always try to work with the public body's timetable. And, actually, because of the onset of the pandemic, we now offer trainings virtually, which we didn't do before the pandemic, but it's always up to the public body or whomever's receiving the training to decide if they want us to come out to where they are or if they want to do them virtually. We do not dictate that to them. We just offer that opportunity. So we will go anywhere in the state to offer these trainings as requested. Our statute actually only talks about public employee training. I think this office was envisioned, probably anecdotally, to handle requests for assistance, mostly coming from the public, and then to train public employees about the requirements and best practices under the public records law. But the way our work has evolved, it's actually sort of spread or cross-pollinated, so that I think a better application of our work to improve the public records process is to also accept requests for assistance from public bodies and to train members of the public. But because we were not initially set up that way, I think we're still sort of working towards our strengths, or more known amongst the communities in which we were initially established. So and we don't actively go out and seek trainings. We make everyone know, we let everyone know we offer trainings, but we generally wait for the people to come to us and ask for trainings, which tend to be the governments, although we are getting more professional private organizations reaching out too. That being said, I do think an informed, educated requester makes for a better process overall, which is why I've never turned away a request from a member of the community for a training. And one goal Yufeng and I have in the new year is to utilize this list that a former intern created for us to reach out to affinity groups in the community and more proactively say, hey, this is who we are. This is what we do. Would you be interested in receiving a training for us? Because I would like to see trainings to the requester community increase beyond the private organizations that have benefited from it, like private investigators and things like that. So there is this goal to interpret our statute more broadly to include private or the requester community and offer more trainings there. If I had to say off the top of my head, most of the requests for assistance from the general public absolutely come from individual members of the public. I live in this community. I want these records from my county council. There's an issue with them. That's most of the requests, but we certainly see requests for assistance come in from businesses and things like law firms too. But if you're an attorney working on a case for which you've submitted a public records request, or let's say you own an auto body shop and you're part of the DEQ2 program and you feel like DEQ isn't giving you records, I generally consider you an individual requester seeking assistance as well, rather than a law firm or a business. So I think it might be a little hard to break down those numbers more. And the truth is, I'd be afraid of losing track. But I'm certainly open to keeping that in mind. And as we move into the new year, maybe seeing if we could subdivide the requester general public category into there, with the understanding that there might be some sort of loose definitions at play. And I don't know if I actually answered your first question. Did I miss your first question, Tony?
No, I think you answered generally what I was looking for. Thank you. That's awesome.
Okay, great.
I didn't realize, I guess if I heard you correctly, that the mandate from the state laws in creating the council and your work was more focused on training public bodies and not as much general members. But at the same time, now thinking 4 years or however long we've been in work and serving the community, seeing that it's individuals, not private investigators or associations or law firms that might make the biggest chunk of your requests for assistance. And also given that you said at the start that this increase of numbers, 264, was scary and comforting because of whatever reasons. To reduce that workload, for lack of a better term, it would seem to me that creating more, it could be informal Q&As and maybe record the first one, or maybe taking some time to do like a general video and post it up on the basics of requesting, or something that if you can get like the general questions that you get from these individuals, if there's a way to create a simple video or something. Maybe, I guess what I'm saying is to make that kind of more, figure out how if the council can figure out how to help support you and growing that outreach, because I think that's an important part, not just visually or not just what's the word, not just in principle, but actually as a part of the job, because it's just, yeah, anyways, I'll leave there.
Yeah, no, undoubtedly. And we do currently have up at least one recorded training and one PowerPoint presentation on the law on our website. And I also created the district attorney's public records orders database, which is continuing to grow. I think we're up to 3 whole counties loaded into it right now. So people have more resources that they can go to on their own. It's linked through our website to learn about the public records processes at their level before they even have to start asking us or the public body from whom they're seeking records any questions about the process.
Great. Thank you, Todd.
Sure.
Andrea.
Sorry.
I was just gonna say, a lot of the records requests that we receive have a pretty personal nature. A lot of people request their own records or records for their family members. And a lot of times they're for agencies that are not our agency. And so a lot of times what we're doing is redirecting folks. We're not required to say who exactly it is that we think where the records live, but we try to guide people. A lot of times we get a lot of requests for police records, surprisingly, and folks don't even say what police agency it is or where in the state the event occurred. And so a lot of it is just really, really basic stuff. Like, you need to go to the organization that conducted the whatever it was, and so I think a really pretty basic thing, and maybe even tailored to whatever. You mentioned DHS and DOC, but if it's DOC folks, I'm guessing there's a particular type of record that folks are usually looking for. Maybe it can be kind of geared a little bit more in that direction, but I don't know. That's just 2 cents there.
No, that's fair. I get many emails as well, like, please provide all records related to X, Y, and Z. So I have to write back, well, actually, we're not the records custodian of any other government. This is what we do. If you want to tell me more, I'm more than happy to help direct you to where to go. I definitely have the policy of no wrong door in state government. So if people contact me about just about anything unrelated to our work, or related to our work, but that we don't do, I try to direct them to the appropriate resource for sure.
All right, Todd, this has been a really good report. I want to thank you for putting this together in a easily digestible manner. I am a little bit nervous about our timeline. We have about 7 more minutes for our meeting to conclude, and we do have a couple agenda items that we need to address. So trying in the spirit of trying to keep us on task and on time, we're going to go to agenda item number 7, council member email addresses. I believe, oh boy, I seem to have spawned 2 quick questions here. Steve, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I believe the meeting was noticed to last till 12:30, so we have a little more time.
Oh, well, forgive me. I see that we are until 12:30, so I'm less concerned. Very good. Thank you for telling me that, Steve. Well, I'll endeavor to finish early then. All right. Well, agenda item number 7, I believe, council member email addresses. Todd, who's taking this one?
I guess me. We had someone from DAS come in and present at a previous meeting, perhaps at the start of this year, about the process, which is it's now doable. In the past, it was not. And then we moved on to a general discussion of why it was a good idea, which of course we are a public body. We are a public body devoted to transparency. It makes sense to have government issued email addresses for all of the council related work, not least of which because if there's a public records request, it makes it easier to gather that data. Although the public records advocate is the records custodian of the council. So if I had a copy of the record at issue, that would be the official copy. But if not, and it was something in your possession, if it's on a personal device, then you are expected to, in good faith, look for that record and then in good faith, tell us if you have it and turn it over for a determination of whether or not it is in any way confidential or should not be disclosed. And of course, if a requester disagrees with our decision, there would be an intermediary appeal to the Attorney General, at which point you would not be required to disclose or turn over your personal device. But if that issue then went into litigation in court, a judge could order you to turn over your personal device for an in-camera inspection, which of course, who wants that to have to happen on their personal device? Thank God we've never gone down that road. Public records requests to this council and to my office have been few and far between, and I think almost exclusively related to the departure of the former advocate. But we don't know what the future holds, and it's certainly a best practice and highly recommended and safest to utilize state email addresses for our work. I know some of you expressed concerns about doing that given the number of email addresses you're already juggling, but that's just where we left it last time, and I would tend to agree with our general thoughts on that.
All right, let's go to Shasta and then Andrea. You're on deck.
Well, let me just add quickly, our office has already been allotted the funds as well for I think probably going to misstate what they're called, but the Microsoft 365 licenses. And it would be, I believe, 2-factor authentication, which means you might all be issued these UB keys that help, that allow you to engage in two-factor authentication. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's great. I think that this is a really important issue, and I'm glad that you've continued to work on it. One of the things that I also think we can keep in mind is that, there are so many councils, and hopefully a lot of them have members of the public and don't have government issued email addresses already. So, this might be an opportunity for us to kind of document how we've addressed this problem and kind of publicize that this is, an appropriate way to go about this issue. Because of the nature of this council, it seems like, people might look to us as a model for how to address this issue. So yeah, I think it's really important that we figure out how to get, a government email address.
Thank you for that. Andrea?
I'm going to advocate for the people who already have government email addresses to be able to keep the government email address and use that as the official, so that we don't have to manage different inboxes. But maybe if there's a way, I think there's a way to if these emails are listed on the website, for example, when someone clicks on it, the subject line is kind of prepared to say Public Records Advisory Council or something like that to kind of flag it as a PRAC type of email. I don't know if that's a helpful suggestion, but I really like the idea of keeping everything in one place.
Well, can I raise one potential issue, and it might just be my lack of knowledge on this topic. For those members who are government employees but not at the state level, their employer would be the custodian of that record then, and then they would be the one subject to the public records request, especially if, again, if it's a record I'm the records custodian for the council, I would provide it as appropriate, but I still couldn't compel them to provide a record from their other employer email address, which I think complicates things a little bit.
That does complicate it a bit. I feel like there could be some sort of solution for thinking about that, but I don't have it in my mind at this moment.
I may have a solution to that. Tony.
Yeah, quick question. So I fully support the idea of private or state email for folks that don't work in the state government. But my question is, if we're creating documents like minutes, will the licenses that the state is that you're getting also include the like Word or whatever? Because I feel like I remember that the presentation earlier this year, whoever was talking about saying using the state license word processors would be a better way of keeping records versus my own computer to create minutes or any other presentation or document. Not that I would, but
I'd have to go back and review, Tony. That's a good question.
Okay, just curious.
So I just have a brief question, and I'm fine with going to a state email address, although I'm a private contractor. I guess the only technical question I have, Todd, is I need it. First of all, I need an IT department if there's anybody out there. But here's my question. If we were to get a state issued email address and we were to receive an email, is there technically or technologically an ability for a notification to be sent automatically to one's regular email address saying you have email? And if that's possible, I think a lot of issues that people may have about having multiple emails would largely be resolved and would certainly be a huge help to me. And Steve, of course, says create a rule in Outlook. There's my IT department right there. So there you have it.
Yes. Yeah, there's definitely a way to do that.
Great. Well, I've basically exposed myself showing that I need an IT department. So very good. That's great. I'm all for it. Okay.
All right. Is this something we need to vote on, or should I just go figure out what the process is for everybody? And let me, to be transparent, I have several government mandated reports to complete by the end of the year. So this is probably more of a January thing for me to start working on.
That's fine. And okay. Andrea has a question.
Sorry, a quick question. If you have a Gmail that you're using for work or whatever, and this special email is created and that sends a ping to that Gmail to say, hey, you have an email over here, does then not open your Gmail up to public record scrutiny? Okay, I just wanted to make sure we weren't inadvertently creating a tunnel there.
No, transitory or non-transitory, what's the word? Ephemeral communications like that are generally not subject to public records requests.
Just wanted to make sure we weren't like
and Andrew, even if the notice itself was, the law expressly prohibits the disclosure of personal email addresses. So that would have to be redacted. Even if we disclose like the notice that was sent, we would have to redact the personal email address.
Great. So it sounds as though there are ways to rig this so that we're all informed about various communications going to our state-issued email addresses. Todd, your question about taking this on in January, that's fine by me. I'm in no rush to have another email account, so feel free to take your time. In the meantime, I know I'm exposed to having my computer hauled into court and possessed, and I'm fairly certain I don't like that idea, but I'm more than willing to do so if that's what it takes to get us there. So thank you. Are there any further questions, comments, concerns on this topic? Great. All right. Council goal setting for next year. Well, could I take the privilege of the chair for something real quickly, Todd, if you don't mind? One one thing that I probably should have shared earlier, and Senator Thatcher is aware of this as well. As you will recall, last session, Senate Bill, what was it, 417 was introduced. The bill received a hearing. At that hearing, the result of that was the chair of the Rules Committee asked that further work be done. Several of you were involved in a work group during the legislative session, and I think I can confidently say that well over 20 hours were spent working on legislation to address fees in public records. We ended up producing a document. It was basically an amendment to essentially gut and stuff 417 with some new language. And as I mentioned, several of you were involved in that work group. After discussing it with Senator Thatcher, as well as the chair of the Rules Committee, it was determined that a bill will be introduced for the short session for the purposes of updating the Rules Committee on where that work group stands at this point. I'll just share with folks that there are about 3 outstanding issues that still need to be resolved. And we didn't feel as though we could necessarily get those issues resolved before the short session, understanding that there are a number of holidays, vacations, school issues, so on and so forth. So with the understanding and I think general approval of both Senators Lieber and Thatcher, the intent will be to update the Rules Committee on where we are with that work, with the understanding that after the short session concludes, that work group will be reconvened to address the remaining issues, hopefully not plow new or plow ground that we've already plowed, and bring that back for the 2025 session. The reason I mentioned this is simply because I know that it has been a goal of this council to address fees in the public records area. And I wanted to ensure, at least from my perspective as the chair, that you have my commitment to continue that discussion after the short session concludes. I just wanted to give everybody that context before we went into this goal setting exercise, because I still believe that this is one of the major goals of this council, and I wanted to report to you as to where things stand at this point. Andrea?
Did you say that that was going to be a bill introduction?
It will be a bill introduction for the purposes of conducting a hearing by Chair Lieber to get an update from myself and a gentleman named Tom Holt, who is the lobbyist for the Society of Professional Journalists. Senator Lieber, Chair Lieber, had asked Tom and I to lead that work group during the last long session. So Tom, and it's my expectation that Tom and I will be asked to appear before the Senate Rules Committee to update the committee on where things stand, what are the unresolved issues, and the plan moving forward. Tony?
Yeah, just curious. So is the recommendation to continue the work in the 2020 in the long session of, did I hear, so skip the short session coming up, do the work in the long session. Now, is there anything, is that because of just more work that needs to be done, or is that because like the short session is only supposed to handle specific issues, and so would the
no, it's a great question, Tony. The issue really became, we have a very short period of time, not only between now and the short session, but also the short session. And there are still 3 outstanding issues that have yet to be resolved we want to take the time and have the oxygen to be able to address those adequately so that we can provide the legislature a product that we're confident is thorough and is at least agreed to in principle as to what the language says. Whether they support it or not is another issue, but whether or not everybody agrees that the language reflects what the group came up with, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yes, Steve?
I don't know if this is a goal, but just in terms of work for next year, I think it would be really helpful for because changes occurred after the PrAC endorsed Senate Bill 417. I think it would be helpful for the council to review it and, if possible, endorse the amendments, at least so that we have that as a starting out point for the work group discussions. And for that reason, I think reconstituting or standing up again the legislative subcommittee would be a good idea. And given that Emily is leaving, I think we'll need to find a new chair for that. So I don't know what we want to do with that.
I'm certainly open to any and all suggestions. I can tell you that, I don't know, Todd, did they ever print the amendment on OLS? I don't think they did.
No, Senator Thatcher might recall better than I. There was a version made, but it never made it to OLS before the session ended. So we have it. It's just
I'm in possession of it as well. So I'm more than happy to send that along so it can be distributed to the council. Scott?
Yes, thank you. I want to just appreciate, Mark, what you said about the plan for the short session and working on it after that for the long session. I think that's a good idea. And I appreciate you raising those questions too, Steve, about how we constitute that. I would also submit as a newly minted subcommittee chair that a goal for this committee should be adopting bylaws in the next year, at least drafting and getting something packaged, if not done by a year from now. And part of that, of course, as we mentioned, establishing an appointing process for the public records advocate. So just want to throw that out there, make sure that we identify that as a goal. Bylaws.
Thank you for that, Scott. I appreciate it. Other ideas for goals for the upcoming? I gather we're shooting for a year. We can do short-term, long-term goals. I suppose it doesn't need to be just for this year. I do think, Tony, is that a legacy hand or is that a new hand?
No, that's a new hand, but please go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, so the legislative subcommittee did a lot of great work in getting the proposal that we're going to present in the next long session. But there was also, if memory serves, like a list that the committee put together of ideas that they wanted to kind of get done. And so my question is, I guess, to the whole council is like, does it feel like it can continue to work toward that list? Or does it continue to focus on the legislation that is on the table for the next long session? And I come at it because just seeing the report from Todd, for me personally, a goal would be to increase public awareness, public trainings. And so I'm trying to figure out, I feel like that list that the legislative subcommittee, I feel like I remember somewhere in putting something about trainings. Maybe I'm wrong, but if it's not in there, I'm wondering if there is any interest of just a discussion of how we can better promote the stuff that's already online on the Public Records Advisory Council to alleviate the workload, for lack of a better word, or maybe better balance out the requests for assistance.
Tony, I think that's a really good point about looking back at our history, and have we, Todd and Lu Fang, have we done some goal setting in the past? And it would be really helpful for us to know if we have done so, and if we have done so, what did we brainstorm, right?
Yeah. So it's interesting, Mark. I think we find ourselves in the same place we were about 2 years ago, because close to the end of that year, we had our first election for leadership after the passage of the statute that like changed things. And then there was a discussion of creating subcommittees. And if memory serves, we created 3. We created a bylaws subcommittee, a legislative subcommittee, and an other subcommittee that included ideas like Tony mentioned about like model policies and templates and how to get word out about the office and increase interactions with the public. And the bylaw subcommittee, I don't think ever met because our former county member, city representative, had left, even though he was going to chair it before his departure. And then bylaws, I think, or maybe the bylaws / other. I'm confused this, but Steve and I believe, were the chair and co-chair of that one, and we became so focused on the legislative work that we never really had the opportunity to do much with the other subcommittee. So I don't know if I'm just going to share my opinion. Like, I think it's a good idea for this council to continue exploring what else it can do. But I'm also afraid of us biting off more than we can chew again.
Wholeheartedly agree with that sentiment. Emily?
Yeah, thanks. I also recall, and I just found a list of ideas that we had originally put into legislation that got dropped along the way that may be of interest to look at again. Not for this legislation. That would not be my personal recommendation, but areas to start educating ourselves about, and areas that actually came up in discussions about, well, wouldn't it be nice if we could put this in this bill because as another trade, but that didn't really fit. So that might be another resource for the council to look at to set some priorities, or just put a list together of what you're trying to keep track of.
Great. And if we have access to that list, that would be super helpful. Steve, I saw your hand up and then went back down again. And it's back up. Thank you.
Sorry. So I don't know. I'm kind of 2 months, but I think I do think, like, as long as the successor to 417 is on the table, that's going to be like kind of like to propose further legislation would be probably unwise. So maybe that opens up some bandwidth for revisiting the non-legislative work that we talked about before. If there's somebody willing to take that on. And the other thing just while I have the floor briefly, if we are to, I do think it makes sense to have the legislative subcommittee meet, even if it's not talking about new business. And I was just going to suggest, Todd, who is the vice chair of that committee, if you were willing to serve as chair, I would not mind being vice chair.
Well, let me ask you, I agree that we should probably get the legislative committee together. I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm happy to participate in that as well. So is there a suggestion that we might want to get a legislative committee meeting prior to the short session, Steve, or do you want that afterwards?
I mean, I think I was going to ask your advice on that. I mean, do you think it would be helpful if we were conceivably able to get some kind of endorsement from the full PrAC of this amendment to be able to report that during your hearing?
Steve, I don't think we necessarily need an endorsement from the PrAC at this point. My preference would be for the this work group to finish its product. And then I'm more than happy, again, to share where we are at this point with the actual language that we did get. Senator Thatcher was able to get drafted by Legislative Council. It was an effort by me and Tom Holt to memorialize where we were in the negotiations, because we were fearful that we would lose some of that, because we ultimately knew that, look, we're not going to have a time to pass this bill during the 23 session. Let's memorialize what we've agreed to this point and then we can move on from there. So Steve, in responding to your direct question, I don't think we need an endorsement. I think we can, and I'll ask the committee or the council, this is an attempt to address costs related to the production of public records. This has been an issue that the PRAC started with the introduction of 417. I think that there's a wholehearted interest in seeing this discussion continue and get to the finish line. But I don't think we would need a PRAC endorsement until we had a final product, if that makes sense. I know that there are several members of the PRAC who are also participating in the work group as well, which actually created some quorum issues, but that's another story. Todd?
Well, I'm just trying to think through what everyone is saying. If it doesn't seem advisable to come up with other legislation during the short session, and all that we really need to do is sort of have a presentation on what the current version of 417 says, do we really even need a legislative subcommittee right now? You know, by not creating one now doesn't preclude us from constituting one later. But to Steve's point, maybe instead we create a different subcommittee to work on non-legislative issues that we could actually have some impact on over the course of the year, especially because, you know, there really aren't that many of us, right, when it comes down to it. And we all find it difficult to serve on more, well, I certainly find it difficult to serve on more than one subcommittee. And so if people say, yes, I'll be on the legislative subcommittee, even though there's not a lot to do, would we then draw people away from other work? Or maybe we just need to focus on the non-legislative work right now with an update to the full council about what the current version of the bill says, or updates about what the work group says as it proceeds through its work.
Well, I saw that Shasta put something in the chat that creation of model policies would be a good thing. Look, I don't have strong feelings one way or the other. I'm more than happy to go with the will of the council here. I don't know if there's really much need for the legislative committee to necessarily meet unless they want to discuss the proposal that came out of the work group, at least as it stands at this point. I could see some utility in the legislative committee looking at, are there other issues that, you know, we want to tee up for after we complete the fee issue, right? I don't know if that's necessarily a timely issue now or after the session. So I have no strong feelings. Steve, again, you have your hand up.
No, I think what Todd says makes sense. I think it's true. Really, all we need is a presentation on what the changes are, and so people are aware. Perhaps a presentation to the full council is the way to go. And there's no urgency if we don't need to do it before the short session. I do think, like, at least having a roster of members that we can call on would be helpful. If we need to respond to legislation that's being introduced by other players, if we want to take a position on any of that. So that's all.
That's a great point, Steve. There is a very distinct possibility that one member of the two chambers will introduce a bill that we haven't anticipated, and the legislative committee may have to take that up. So I think we want to be nimble enough to be able to respond quickly during the short session to respond to any unanticipated legislation. But otherwise, I do agree to some extent that the legislative committee probably should be reconvened shortly after the short session concludes, with the understanding that, hey, we may have a meeting during session to address a proposal that has been introduced. Does that sound like an appropriate path moving forward? I'm getting some head nods and thumbs up, so I think that's where the direction will go. We're still on goal setting, though, folks, and I'd like to raise one thing, if I may. you know, in listening to Todd over the last couple of years, there's clearly in my mind a need for additional assistance for the public records advocate. And so I do think I believe, at least this is my sole opinion, I believe that Todd is demonstrating a public benefit with this office, that they could do more, that and that we should be supportive of his efforts for that. And so one of the goals that I think we should be looking at is how this council can provide support to the advocate in furthering the services and work that they do. So that would be at least one of my goals for the council, is to be supportive of Todd in his efforts to stand up his office. And I hope somebody's writing these down. I know Tony will get to it eventually, but you know, I think Todd's office is sort of working on a shoestring balance, or budget, I should say. And that's great. I mean, he's doing fantastic work, but there, at least in my mind, there's clearly some need for additional assistance. So that would be one of my goals. Sorry, and happy to entertain more. Come on, there's got to be more.
Do we have any kind of, sorry, I just jumped in, like mission statement or anything like that?
Bylaws.
I don't know if that exists. I guess that could be part of the bylaws discussion.
Yeah.
Bylaws.
If I can jump in, I think given that we have this kind of like off year, and that we have Todd's position expiring or whatever, that, you know, the big emphasis, it seems to me that, you know, maybe we shouldn't try to like overextend ourselves.
Right.
And given that it's important to have a mission statement and value statement that should be included in the bylaws, in my opinion, maybe our general, it's okay to have just, you know, the general goals of, you know, setting up and establishing good, solid bylaws that, with an emphasis of making sure we have a good process in place for the hiring, retention of the public records advocate. Continued support for the bill 417, but the amount of work that the council has already done in getting the fees legislation to where it's at. And then also supporting Todd and getting the staff and the resources that he needs, however that looks like. And I don't know if that needs its own council or committee, but you know, those seem like good, solid 3 goals, because I know everyone is busy with their work. And given the history of our trying to like set up a good number of, you know, what Todd said, you know, we had 3 committees that were established 2 years ago and 2 fizzled away. So maybe it's smart to keep just with like 1 committee and try not to overextend ourselves and get in another position 2 years from now. We'll be like, oh, we remember we set up that 1 committee, but then it just kind of fell apart. So
yeah,
that would be my proposal, just to kind of out of those 3. If I missed an idea, please let me know.
So Scott put something in the chat: bylaws and appointive process, legislation, which is again the legislative subcommittee, but everybody will be involved, and then supporting the advocate's office, subcommittee work, bylaws, and so forth. So I think we have a pretty decent list there that'll keep us occupied, but I do want to check in with Senator Thatcher and Representative Anderson. You folks are elected individuals who obviously not only hold the purse strings to the Public Records Office, but I'm also curious from your perspective as elected officials whether or not there's anything that we think we've conspicuously missed here. sorry to put you on the spot, but I you know.
I just feel like we have, as a council, we're used to spending a lot of time on this because we've been trying to get our feet under us and trying to get the processes right and changing to an independent office. And all that took Herculean work. And I don't think it has to be that way continuing on. I think once we are set up, we have the bylaws and all those important things that were mentioned, that we won't have that same workload, honestly. But I like, you know, for the public records advisory, or excuse me, public records advocate, there is kind of a mission statement that's put online there that I like. And I don't know, maybe we just want to adopt that one with our bylaws, providing dispute resolution services, training, guidance, and advice to improve the administration of Oregon's public records laws. That's real simple, and it seems like it makes it. And I think Todd must have come up with it. I don't know. Good job. And then on the page, it spells out the Public Records Advisory Council and the duties. And so putting some meat on the bones to get some more detail and bylaws to build upon the statutes that are very, you know, dry, I think is in order. But I don't think it has to be the hard, time-consuming, nitpicking, every single word being parsed kind of a committee going here on out, for the most part. Anyway, that's just my opinion.
Thank you, Senator. Representative, any thoughts?
Yes, what the senator said happens to be pretty much my opinion too. First thing I want to say is, in 8 years on the city council, we had these kind of issues in front of us all the time. I mean, it was in Salem and lots of things happen in Salem. So I think the purpose of this committee is extremely valuable. And I also agree with the what the senator read of the pseudo mission statement that that is already there. And finally, now I'm talking as a lawyer more than a legislature, I agree with the senator as well. It's very arduous task to get the infrastructure and the framework in place for what we're going to do. So we built the ski jump now, and now we're going to take off down going fast, and we're going to soar. Okay?
Or crash spectacularly like Wide World of Sports back in the day, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Todd, please.
One, I used to love that show. And two, I would just want to say, since we're sort of putting all our eggs in one basket, not necessarily in a bad way, but to do the work of like building the bones on this council that we've been doing informally, this is a push for more members to join the bylaws committee we already established. That's going to be chaired by Scott, because this is really important work that will outlive any of our membership on the council. And you could be part of setting this basic infrastructure that is important, but I don't think will be quite as Herculean as drafting 417 was, but are really important discussions to have. And for every aspect of that, other than the advocate appointment, reappointment, et cetera, process, I will wholeheartedly participate in. So you could count me in as an official member.
Great. All right. I'm going to make one comment, and then we'll talk about our next meeting date and topics. I just want to share with you that it's really been an honor being a chair of this group. I know I took it against my will. But I'm really proud of the work that we've done. And I'm more proud of the collaboration, the honesty, the willingness to be direct, open, and sharing everybody's views. As I said, I kind of view this as trying to herd everybody into the same way. I've always tried to make things unanimous. I know that you can't always do that, but I think we speak with a better voice when we are. And so I just wanted to share with each of you my appreciation to each of you for how you've conducted yourselves, how you've participated, and your contributions, I think, have really made a difference. And I'm really excited to know that we are moving towards formal bylaws. We've been working for 5 years without them, and I think we've been pretty functional, but it would sure be nice to have a foundation upon which we can work in the future. So I just wanted to share my gratitude to each of you for that. So having said that, Todd, next meeting date, I'm throwing it at you to some extent, and topics. Oh, Tony, I'm sorry, I missed your hand. Is that a legacy hand?
Yep, it's a legacy hand, my bad.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Oops. Okay. If you're throwing to me off the top of my head, I would say March. Description of current form of 417 and any work done so far by the bylaws subcommittee. Oh, and welcoming new members if we got them.
Great. Any other, and we'll have a flexible enough agenda so that if topics arise between now and then, we'll convene or add them to the agenda. The other, just notice for all the members, those of you who serve on the legislative committee, and we should probably make sure that that list is updated, Todd, and get that sent out so that in the event that a bill is introduced and the PrAC wants to take a position on it, that we can convene the legislative committee during the short session beginning February 5th.
Well, do we still have all the same people? Do all the same people want to serve? And I heard Steve talking more about maybe like a legislative strike force that can be authorized by the council to speak on their behalf about bills. Like in the past, for instance, like the council has authorized you and me, or you, Emily, and I to talk about, you know, bills on behalf of the council. So are we leaning more towards that rather than just having everyone on? Because of course we can all still comment individually about any bill that's out there as well, but as representatives of the council and with a sort of like a quick reaction time, should it be more that we're just authorizing a few of us rather than like sort of having everyone on deck?
You know, it's a great question, Todd, and it really depends, I think, on what the nature of the bill might be. I mean, it might be something that everybody's hair goes on fire and they want to have a discussion, or it could be something rather innocuous where we feel, yeah, this is something that we can probably do. But I do think that it makes sense to have the committee at least on notice that we may convene a legislative committee for the purposes of discussing legislation that has been introduced. However, I'm also open to the idea that if the PrAC wants to empower the advocate and the chair and the new vice chair to speak on the PrAC's behalf on legislation being introduced, I'm fine with that as well. It's the will of the group, and I would like to hear people's reaction.
I vote for a strike force.
My question is, so if there's the advocate, chair, and vice chair meeting, does that constitute a public meeting? And would that need to be, what's the number of members that I forget?
6.
It's 6. Okay. Yeah. And then I guess. Yeah, never mind. Well, I guess, yeah. So if the 3 are meeting on a emergency basis, is there a way to include other members, the option, or give the other, just because, like we said, in other subcommittees, members of the PrAC who aren't part of the legislative subcommittees can attend a subcommittee meeting if they want to. Can that be the same? Hey, the 3 of us are going to meet on this topic, and we're reacting strike. Anyone else who can meet with us, please attend this conference call or whatever. Can that be? Not that I personally. Anyways, I'll just shut up. But that's my question.
I would certainly welcome anybody who wants to attend. Excuse me, attend a conversation between the chair, vice chair, and the advocate. If they wanted to participate, they're more than welcome to do so. Having said that, Tony, we have to avoid getting to 6 because if we get to 6, we have to notice. Right?
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Steve?
I just wanted to suggest, in the interest of time, since we're over,
Yep.
could we plan on convening a very quick legislative subcommittee meeting to make a recommendation on what to do about this, because we're not going to figure it out right now.
Great idea. Let's do that mid-January. And it'll be a 15-minute meeting. Fair enough? All right. It seems like-
Realistically, 30.
Pardon?
Realistically, 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's a possibility. We'll make it for 30 and shoot for 15, Emily. Okay. Is there any other business for the good of the order? I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. This was a great meeting. Welcome, Representative Anderson. Senator Thatcher, thank you for joining us. Everybody have a wonderful day, and don't forget to take your life vests out if you go outside. Have a great day.
Bye.